Is everybody's phone muted? What happened there? I didn't touch it.
Okay, it's not.
Pat a plot, gardener's man. Plant me a tree as fast as you can. Dig it and pat it and mark it with an E. Put it in the ground for earth and me. Pat a plot, gardener's man. Grow that tree as fast as you can. Feed it and water it, mark it with an E. Watch it grow for earth and me. Pat a plot, gardener's man. Plant me a tree as fast as you can. Dig it and pat it and mark it with an E. Put it in the ground for earth and
That's where you start talking.
Angela's gonna.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Angela Vinson. I'm a volunteer with 350 Sacramento, and we've been celebrating our 10-year anniversary all month long. And tonight, we have a very special guest, Mary DeMocker, who is here to talk about her book, The Parent's Guide to Climate Revolution, 100 Ways to Build a Fossil-Free Future, Raise Empowered Kids, and Still Get a Good Night's Sleep. To start us off, I'm going to shout out some of our sponsors who helped make this event possible. We have our climate rock star, which is SMUD, our climate heroes, Chrysalis Cosmetics, and the Sacramento Metro Air Quality Management District. Moving on to our climate champions, we have an anonymous donor, the Environmental Council of Sacramento, ECOS, Councilmember Steve Hansen, District 4, Rosanna Herbert, SMUD Director, Ward 4, Dave Tamayo, SMUD Director, Ward 6, Save the American Rivers Association. Moving on to our climate guardians, we have Borderlands Bakery, California Solar and Storage Association, Environmental Student Organization at Sac State, Green Restaurants Alliance, Sacramento, Grass/Resoil, Mogavero Architects, Physicians for Social Responsibility, Brandon Rose, SMUD Director, Ward. All right, we've got a few more climate guardians to shout out to help make this work possible. The Sacramento Native American Health Center, the Solar Rights Alliance, Heidi Sanborn, SMUD Director. Sunrise Movement Sacramento, Therapists for Social Responsibility, United Nations Association of the USA Sacramento Chapter, and the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. Thank you so much for supporting our work. I'm going to kick it over to Goli, another faithful volunteer for 350 Sacramento, to keep us going.
Thanks, Angela. Welcome, everyone. My name is Goli Saba, and I'm also a volunteer with 350 Sacramento, and I'm a family physician. We're so thrilled to have you join 350 Sacramento celebration, 10 years of collective climate activism. 350 Sacramento is a local grassroots organization committed to equitable solutions that accelerate the transition to a sustainable future with atmospheric carbon dioxide levels below 350. That's where we get our name. We believe in a world with a safe climate where nature is respected and protected, and our social, political, and economic systems work for all people and the planet. I wanted to introduce Moise Muir, our amazingly talented staff person and tech wizard, who studied at Sac State Environmental Studies. He's going to give us just a couple, little bit of info about the way that things are going to run with the YouTube. Okay.
Hey everyone watching. So on the right, you should see your YouTube live chat. Feel free to drop questions in there throughout the event, and we'll get to them towards the end as we get to our question and answer period.
Thanks. Before we go on to our main speaker, we wanted to mention some of the accomplishments of our organization briefly. In 2014, we worked with a coalition of organizations to stop 700 car trains carrying Bakken crude oil and toxic tar sands oil coming through Sacramento each day. We organized and trained 30 young people with our youth camp for climate action, many of whom are now great climate activists locally. We're also designing a youth climate curriculum to get students to start environmental clubs in their school. Angela?
We've also held many community forums to help educate folks in Sacramento about the goal of carbon zero. And 350 Sacramento has also served on the Governor's Commission on Climate Change for 2 years now. And we have a team to ensure that the adopted commission recommendations are followed through and sped up.
All right. And Moise, can you just show the prizes slide before we start with Mary? All right. I think Moise, you were going to tell them about it.
Yeah, so sorry about that. Yeah, at the end of tonight's event, we will announce our 6 prize winners. We have 3 winners who are going to be winning a 350 Sacramento Climate Hero t-shirt shown at the right. 2 winners will get signed copies of Mary's The Parent's Guide to Climate Revolution. And then we have 1 grand prize winner with sunset sail and dessert at Folsom Lake.
Yeah. All right. Now it's my honor to introduce our featured guest. Mary DeMocker is a writer, an artist, a mom, and a climate activist extraordinaire, and author of The Parent's Guide to Climate Revolution, 100 Ways to Build a Fossil-Free Future, Raise Empowered Kids, and Still Get a Good Night's Sleep. She's a 2019 Oregon Book Award finalist and has been recommended on NPR and in the New York Times. Mary is the co-founder and former creative director of 350 Eugene, with whom she designed and co-led youth-centered protests featured on PBS, NewsHour, Art Cop 21, and which was the global climate art festival, and in Ava's video shown to world leaders at Paris Climate Talks. She's written about creative climate advocacy for the Sun, Sierra, Spirituality and Health, ECO-Watch, The Oregonian, and Climate Dreams. For amazing videos and photos of the author's public installations, including the block-long faux pipeline to protest Oregon's proposed fracked gas export pipeline, you can go to marydemocker.com. She lives in Eugene, Oregon with her family. So everyone, please join me in giving a warm eco welcome to Mary DeMocker, who has inspired so many parents, teachers, and kids with her writing, art, and fearless spirit to protect our planet for future generations and Earth's countless species.
Thank you so much, Goalie. I so appreciate your invitation for me to come be with you tonight for this exciting celebration of 10 years, 350 Sacramento. Go you guys, it's wonderful. And thank you to the whole team for helping to put this together and to the sponsors. And of course, most of all, thank you to all of you who are tuning in tonight on your Saturday night and taking this time. I feel very honored to have your time and attention And I hope you're cozied in. It's very cold up here in Oregon. We're getting the winter chill this weekend for the first time. So everybody's starting to hibernate. So I think what I'd like to do is I'm going to show you some fun pictures. I have a lot of artistic things to show you and lots of things with young people. So I'm just going to launch right into my presentation for you. So here we go. Okay, so I am going to have 4 sections tonight. This will be about 22 minutes. In fact, I'm going to set a timer because I get so excited that I often go too long. So here we go. So I'm going to share a little bit about who I am and how I've engaged young people, then kind of a quick picture of where we are this crazy time, like 10 days before the election, the bad and the good news. Then we're going to have Goli ask for 5 easy things that anybody can do right now, and then 5 ideas, low-hanging fruit for parents and teachers. And I would throw in clinicians and youth group leaders at faith communities that anybody can do who lives with or works with young people. So who am I? I was an activist starting at NYU, where I went to school. And so that was back in the early 80s, mid 80s. And we were doing a lot on Central American solidarity work to fight the Covert War in Central America and fight apartheid in South Africa and nuclear weapons. So that's me taking over the building up at Columbia University many years ago in the winter. So then we had 12 years of, Reagan and Bush, and a lot of us kind of were so tired out that I moved out to the West Coast and I was studying music. I'm a classical and folk harpist. And I started to do kind of eco-living. It felt like, I don't know, things were kind of dying in the 90s and late 80s and 90s under those Republicans. And so I learned a lot about living green. And then I had children and learned more about living green with families. So we were all about shrinking the carbon footprint. And yet in the early 2000s, when my kids were little, the global temperatures kept rising, and you're a 350 group, so you don't need the slideshows, the slides I usually give everybody else explaining this part, what's happening. But there was a fossil fuel frenzy, as you know, there still is. And the US is now the #1 producer of oil and gas on the planet. And so that's where we are today. But back then, early 2000s, we were urged to respond to this crisis, this fossil fuel frenzy, by changing our light bulbs and doing personal lifestyle things, going vegan and consuming better. And we were so low income that, my husband, we were both teachers, kind of part-time, being with little kids. And I really struggled with this idea that we were supposed to have an electric vehicle and we were supposed to have organic everything, and that we were going to also have to figure out how to have a personal green infrastructure with solar, and we were supposed to hang our laundry. And by 2007, I was exhausted. And there wasn't even a pandemic, and I was exhausted. And I felt there wasn't enough attention on the oil industry and the way that all 3 branches of the government were being taken over, and all these big system changes were getting, the polluters were getting more and more latitude to pollute. And billionaires after 2010 were able to essentially buy elections. So in 2007, I decided I couldn't do both anymore. I couldn't advocate and be an activist, which is what I was called back to after about 10 years of living green and being vegan. And I decided to start writing. So I started taking writing classes and started to advocate for system change, not just light bulb change. And I did it only on my authority as a mother. I wasn't a scientist, I wasn't a celebrity, I wasn't rich or famous, but I refuse to have my kids' planet killed on my watch. And so I just started announcing that publicly with no other authority than I love my children and I'm hardwired to protect them, and so is every other parent. So that's where I wrote from. At the same time, I started doing about the same time, I started doing front lawn occupations. And I did that for 4 years straight. So this was Halloween 2011. And I actually have another one, kind of a better, funnier one up now that I made that's out on my front lawn for this year's Halloween, but it's the graveyard that we need. It's everything we need dead. And I put that out and it was kind of scary, but people loved it. And so I did another 14 over the next 4 years. And they became more interactive, and I always had an ask. So some of them were register to vote, excuse me, register to vote or support. This one is the support the Eugene single-use plastic ban, or try to stop the Keystone Pipeline with some postcards that we will give you. At the same time, so now I'm kind of moving into, now I'm blending together, what I've done in the last 10 years with kind of things that you can think about to do with young people in your groups, young people and families. So then we started doing more protests, and I was leading a lot of them and designing them. I was the creative director at this point, after we co-founded 350 Eugene, I think in the winter of 2014. But we had been doing protests before that with other 350 groups in Portland. And my kind of mission was, let's make these family friendly. Let's make it clear when there are arrests happening so that we're not putting families in uncomfortable situations. Let's have bathrooms. Let's have the way that we walk be in a loop so that we don't make it hard for people with toddlers to get back to their homes afterwards. So that was my focus, was family friendly and handing young people the microphone. That's my big, maybe one of the biggest things if you get out of tonight is give young people the microphone and invite them to speak at your meetings. They don't realize how much we older people are hungry for young people's voices. And that was kind of my job too, was saying, hey, instead of having, 8 different middle-aged activists speak about the climate, why don't we have none? And why don't we just invite young people and then we'll do something interactive? So I kind of brought this new form of, because my background is in the arts. I'm a harp teacher. I performed my whole life. I was in the film industry in New York. I did a lot of street music and a lot of theater. And I believe in putting the audience first and meeting their emotional needs. And most of the time, audiences don't actually need to hear from a bunch of people soapboxing. And so I kept asking people to flip it. What does the audience need? Not what do you need to say? And that really was, I think, a successful model for the years that I was the creative director, because we had a lot of fun. We had really good protests. So this is a spoken word, a multicultural theater group, and they did spoken word that I helped them with, and then they led the march. And we, in this one, I co-designed a children's tribunal outside of the courthouse on the day that, let's see, let me quickly explain. I'm guessing a lot of you have heard of the Juliana court case, the 21 young people who are suing the Trump administration. It was the Obama administration for destroying the climate. And the young people have a constitutional right to a livable planet. And this particular case totally fires up young people, especially here, because this is where so many of the hearings are. This is where our Children's Trust, which is the group representing young people, operates. So we had a lot of fun for several years getting young people fired up about this case, and then they would come down and support all the plaintiffs every time they went to court. It was quite a beautiful little season there for a while, and that was partly why these young kids were on PBS NewsHour. And these are some of the selfies that people sent to the decision makers around this case. And then at this kind of in the same time, we decided to make some puppets for protests. And this is our Governor Kate Brown. So this was made in Eugene, and then Portland heard about our puppet and they borrowed it to shut down the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission after they approved the Jordan Cove pipeline that we are fighting tooth and nail up here. So this puppet was just kind of an idea that I had from being a protester in New York in the 80s. I saw a lot of Bread and Puppet Theater puppets. I don't know if any of you know Bread and Puppet Theater, but they're wonderful. They do huge pageants and huge puppets. And I wanted to bring that sort of different way of protesting to Eugene. And so this puppet has gone all over the state to different protests. Another thing that we did was to start Eugene 350 Families. And that was created specifically to engage people that were missing from our group, which is parents with young children still at home. And so we do, well, I had to step back from 350 to write the book, but there's a group now that does 4 public events every year just for families. The other thing that we did that was super successful, I don't think it's going right now because the college student has graduated, but I put out the call for an intern for a climate arts camp. And for 3 summers, we had an intern who had a camp at her family's home out in the country. And they would do art, and then we would coordinate with them. At the end of their camp, we would have a protest and they would lead it. So this was, now I want to move into kind of merging together the artwork and 350, and then my sort of back to my own story the last few years. So in 2015, 350 Eugene learned about the Jordan Cove pipeline, and it had already been a battle for 10 years, but it was kind of switching because all of a sudden it was an export pipeline. So when we learned that they were condemning private properties in Oregon for a Canadian company to do a fracked gas export pipeline, I built on those small lawn installations that you saw earlier, and I took over the whole block with 350's help. And we set up, it's on my website, you can see all the different stations, and there's a lot of information, a lot of photographs on my website. But in short, our ask was, tell the governor to oppose this pipeline because she has the power to probably to stop it. And this, we also had a selfie station and a newsroom, and we called a press conference, and we had quite a lot of people there and quite a lot of attention in the neighborhood. It was up for 5 days. It was a block long display with, all the trees were wrapped to be cut and condemned. It was pretty dramatic. But the reason I'm telling you all this is that I learned a lot after the 5 days. So it was on the radio for 5 days, and then Bill McKibben tweeted it out, and suddenly hundreds of thousands of people learned about this little known threat in Oregon, and a statewide coalition sprang up almost overnight, connecting Portland and Eugene. We were, in between Portland with the population base, and then there's Eugene and then Little Coos Bay that's fighting it. So all of a sudden we have this statewide coalition, and it's been a powerful coalition to resist this pipeline. The other thing that really impressed me about this was how much it unified the neighborhood, and especially educated and engaged young people. They were so excited. It was 2 weeks to build this thing, and they were all involved. Everybody from toddlers all the way up to the grad students were involved in this project. It united our neighbors. It was about 50 different people that were involved, plus the 350 people. So that's what really struck me, was how much media attention we got. We were on the front page, we were on the TV, and then, like I mentioned, the statewide radio, and how much it made people happy. It really delighted people. So moving on from that, then we took this is kind of my last big one before I then stepped back to write the book about all this, because it seemed so successful. Like maybe it's important to actually share some of these ideas. So this was a few months later, and we moved it out of my neighborhood into a local park. So we started with, so this is the Global Climate March. We started with youth plaintiffs, again, putting the young people forward. They were the main speakers, and we helped them with their speeches. we mentored them instead of, kind of asking them to show up at our thing. We reversed it. We put the kids forward and we stepped back, and we were kind of the roadies for the young people. And then they led the march with a different huge puppet. There she is, the Sun Queen. And then we went into a park, and this is the part that it was quite a production. This is from the air. We were asking people to help us tell leaders, what we wanted. We wanted to be off dirty energy and on clean energy. So people use their bodies to create this giant oil drip. And as we filmed from the air, they transformed into a bright sun, the symbol of solar power. And then we actually sent that video right out that day to Avaz, a global organization that was actually collecting all the images of people's protests. And sure enough, Monday morning, it was shown, our little video was shown to world leaders in Paris. So that was pretty exciting. And people knew that was going to happen. So people that were involved in this told me afterwards how excited they were to be part of something unifying and fun. And that was part of this global, it was that same weekend, everybody all over the world was doing this. And it was before the Paris Climate Agreement, and we were asking for a binding agreement. And it hit on many levels for people. It really kind of checked a lot of boxes. And 2 weeks beforehand, we gave local high schoolers that are part of a climate club, we gave them community service hours to make eco cookies. And then we froze them for 2 weeks and then brought them out so that, and everybody knew that after we finished filming, you're all going to get one of these eco cookies made by these high schoolers. So that's another thing that we did. We kind of figured out is community service hours are a great way to engage young people, because you just sign off on their, if they come and help you paint something, or they, these cookies, or there are countless ways that we need volunteerism in our groups. Give young people, especially National Honor Society kids, they need a lot more community service hours than most high schoolers. So look for the NHS kids and tell them what you're doing, and make contact with their advisors and tell them that you've got programs. So there's a little side magic. So all in all, I felt, I want to tell you one other thing. One of those boys that was on there, the middle one, who spoke at our rally, he spoke at the rally, he co-led the march, and he was on the evening news. He was interviewed on the evening news at that protest with the giant Sun Queen. He told his mom at the end of the day, this was the best day of my life. And that really struck me, that people of all ages are happier in general and more connected if they're engaged in meaningful solutions. People are so despairing about the climate crisis. Young people are despairing, and they feel in general better when they have something that feels meaningful. Okay. And this is the point at which people were asking me for ideas for how to work with young people, and parents were saying, I'm too busy to do all this. Give me 5 or 10 things. And so then I wrote the book. Okay, so now, and so I stepped back at that point. So now I'm doing speaking and writing. I'm not actively part of doing protests. I just go to them a lot. Okay, part 2. So where are we now? I'm going to skip this part because I talked for too long. So we know where we are. We've got to win this election, and we've got to pass a Green New Deal. Okay, so I'm going to go straight to, since I only have 3.5 minutes left, to the 5 things for each group. One is for parents. I'm not sure how many parents are watching this, but we're going to hope there are several, or that parents, and maybe you can get some use out of this. So I think the number one thing that I have found with my kids, so my kids are now 21 and 25. And I think that there's a lot out there about how to talk to young people about the climate crisis. And I've talked about this, I've written about it. And I think one of the most important things we can do is talk less and take more action, to model what it looks like to save the world. Obviously, we only have a few years until 2030, which is the end, very last, depending on who you talk to, we have definitely only a few years, if that, to turn this ship around. And scientists say that we do have all the technology and resources we need to do that in time. And so I think that's one of the biggest things I would say in terms of what are the top 5 things that anybody can do is learn what those things are, get excited about the fact that scientists say we can do those things in time, because a lot of people don't know that. I mean, it's an open question. I'm not saying that it's a slam dunk, but I want people to talk about more the fact that scientists are saying we can do this. And that really one of the biggest things that we need is to tell ourselves that, and to tell everybody that, and to tell that story in any way that we can. So that's what my TED Talk is about next week, is about all the ways that we can creatively restory the future and have fun while we're doing it. So adults together who are showing young people, this is what it looks like to be engaged in grassroots. Oh, can you hear me okay? Goldie, can you give me a signal? Yeah, okay. Adults showing young people what it looks like to be engaged in community activism in a way that's sustainable, not a burnout situation, is actually a really large gift to give young people. Aside from giving them emotional support and giving them ideas for how they can plug in if and when they're ready. But I think it's important to model it, and that's what I found in my own family. Also, just if you can only do one thing, if you have 5 minutes, if you're a parent who has absolutely no time, and a lot of parents really have absolutely no time right now, and I don't want to underestimate that. I mean, before I tell parents 5 things that they can do, I want to say, you're doing a lot being a parent and being a parent in a pandemic. So just big hug and shout out to all parents. What you're doing is profound work right now. So if you have 5 minutes once a month, make the call that 350 Sacramento is telling you to make. I'm sure 350 always has a list of ideas for things that you can do. Show up when it matters. Show up at that protest or at that hearing when it matters. So that's number 1, model civic engagement. Number 2 is use this time in the pandemic. A lot of us are learning and relearning, unlearning and relearning racist and colonial history. So educate yourself, educate your community, educate young people on solutions to racism. I love this particular essay. There are lots of good books that are out there. And for a short kind of, whoops. Okay, stop. Sorry, I don't know how to turn it off. Sorry. All right, 2 more minutes for me. This is called Racism is Killing the Planet. It's online, Sierra Magazine. I think this very succinctly and beautifully helps people who don't understand why we need to address racism in the climate crisis. A lot of people say that. So read this and show this to them. Read it with your kids if they're old enough. If not, look on Goodreads for the Black Lives Matter list, and you'll find in all ages, all different ages for reading. Next, connect with young leaders and help young people connect with young leaders, whether they're world famous like Jamie Margolin or whether they're in your own high school or middle school. Connect everywhere you can. This book, Youth to Power, I did a review of in Sierra Magazine. And it's a wonderful book. I think it's great for adults. It's called Youth to Power. So that's my number 3 is help young people be inspired by other young people. Number 4 is to use your network and ask your coach, ask the principal, how are you going to prioritize children in the climate crisis? And really ask people in a kind way. People are overwhelmed by the pandemic, but little nudges about how can we bring more climate literacy into the school curriculum? How are you going to use your role as a doctor to advocate for youth health in the climate crisis? Same with parents using their moral authority with public representatives. How are you protecting my kids? And then the last thing for parents is And again, my TED Talk talks about some of this, and so does my book, Unleash Kid Creativity. Unleash your own creativity. And here are some ideas. You can paint banners, you can paint your bike, you can paint up your car or your porch, you can paint rocks to leave around town with climate messages. Down in the Bay Area, I know they're doing family walk and chalks where you do some Black Lives Matter and ecological protests with chalk. Mentor kids in writing op-eds and ask what they'd like to do and kind of daydream with them. There's usually no shortage of ideas from young people. Also, it's a great time right now to make puppets. Those are great outdoor things for protests. You can use them and be socially distant. Okay, so now to switch for the last kind of 90 seconds here on what anybody can do. I think a lot of what I said about parents can be used for anybody, but obviously help the Democrats win. And you can still do text banking and phone banking. Remind young people to vote. They need to get out. Here, a list on the right of some groups that are doing the get out the vote. I wonder, I'm just throwing this out there, if there's poll watching that should be happening in some of the swing states. I'm not sure what that looks like, but I'm wondering why there isn't more kind of about that right now to kind of be a calming presence going forward. Number 2, donate to groups doing the defend the vote, defend the results, protect the results, which is not the same as protect the vote. That one is by Republicans, and that's kind of calling people to bring their guns. So just donate to the groups, vet them first. Sunrise Movement, I know that you're collaborating down there in Sacramento. Sunrise Movement is doing a lot of work for that, as is Indivisible and Stand Up America. So just throw those people some money right now, if you can. Number 3, and this is a big topic. I'm just gonna throw it out there. I'm really advocating in general that we stop blaming individuals or humans for the climate crisis. I think we really need to focus on the culpability of the few dozen carbon majors who have put in the lion's share of the carbon pollution over the last 50, 80 years. So I really focus a lot in my work on let's move off of blaming individuals, because we're all captive within a carbon infrastructure and oil infrastructure, and focus more on system change and make your own individual choices, but really don't, I advocate not really guilt tripping yourself or other people, especially parents, because there's enough mom bashing out there that we all deal with, especially now with the pandemic. Last 2 are, kind of like above, amplify the voices of youth, amplify the voices of those most impacted, people of color, the poor, vulnerable worldwide, and in our own communities. And I think it's important to remember that when we fight, we win. And activism really does work. It's not easy and it's not fast all the time, but it does work. And usually we feel a lot better. So I think I want to end on that. I know there are questions, and thanks for listening. And I'll stop my share. Let's see, stop share. Okay.
Thank you so much, Mary. A virtual round of applause. Educating youth is one of my passions, so it was a particularly exciting for me to hear you talk about how we need to be handing the mic over to the youth voices and make space for them to help lead some of these efforts. So first question for you, you touched on this a little bit, but well, first of all, just say, continue to post your questions in the YouTube chat. Obviously, be respectful, and we'll be bringing in those questions to Mary. But first off, can you talk a little bit about what clicked for you? What was that light bulb moment, no pun intended, that that made you realize that this is the message that you need to get out with this book?
You mean like when I finally just in 2007 said, I can't do this. I can't be hanging laundry and protesting and parenting.
Yeah, was there a particular moment that just things came together and then made you kind of pivot to focus your efforts on writing this book and getting this message out of system change to parents and the like?
Yeah, I think so. A light bulb moment. Yeah, I'd say there wasn't any particular moment. I'd say it was a growing realization that my friends were not organizing with me. I would do these family-friendly protests and rallies, and they would come, but they would never join in the organizing. And these are people that I protest. Some of them live with, on my block that I protested with in New York, in the 80s. And I would say, how come you're not coming to these, why don't you be part of it? And they would tell me why. And there were a lot of reasons, mostly that they weren't family friendly, that there was no childcare. It was never really considering the needs of families in the meeting times, which I found as well. But also they would say things like, there's this feeling that we have to do consensus and it's a lot of time and I don't have that much time. And the thing that I realized also was that parents have a lot of relationships. We have relationship with teachers, with therapists, with neighbors, with youth group leaders, with coaches, I've never had more relationships in my life than when I was actively parenting. And I realized I wasn't looking for new friends. I was looking for collaborators. So maybe that's too long an answer, but I realized that the culture of the climate movement needed to open up and it needed to change in very specific ways. And the book maybe could help groups do that. And it could help parents find a way in through not necessarily joining a group that they felt they were too busy to join.
Great. Thank you, Mary. And I'm not a parent, but I bought your book. I haven't gotten through it, but I love that it's broken up into different chapters based on different themes, and it's kind of meant to be able for a busy mom or dad to just pick up and read a chapter and get inspired and then move on. So I think that's one of the great things about it. So I loved in your presentation how you talked about how you've brought in art through all of your activism. We have a question from Douglas. Have you incorporated any of your harp playing or your music into your activism?
To be honest, I'm injured. So no, I haven't. I would like to, maybe if I can figure that out, but sadly, no. I have written a couple of songs and a bunch of chants. And that's where I've used my own sort of musicality is in one song that we use sometimes at rallies. But I say that kind of more to say that we need more songs. So songwriters, musicians, please, we need to be singing. We need a lot more chants out there. And I think we need some really upbeat songs. And that's not my strength, is upbeat, sort of fast stuff, being a harpist. So I think we just need to put out the call for a lot of fun, upbeat, catchy songs in the climate movement.
Mary, you teed me up, so I'm going to give a shameless plug right now. I wrote a children's book and album with my mom, and we took traditional nursery rhymes and we changed the lyrics, and so they're all about the environment. And they're super fun, catchy beats for kids. We were listening to one of them before we got started. So anyway, thanks for teeing me up there. But let's get back to your work. So we have a question from Lily. Can you share some of your proudest wins in your years of climate activism?
Yeah, I think for me, in a way I kind of shared them by sharing that I think that pipeline, seeing what it did for people was a win. And also the coalition that sprang up, maybe it would have sprung up anyway, I don't know, but it did happen that week. And I felt really good about that, like that we together, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work, I have to say. It was a lot of people and a lot of work and a lot over quite a bit of time. And after all that work, I wasn't sure anybody would notice. And then to have this coalition spring up was really, it felt like a win for me personally, in that I had envisioned this as something that I hoped would engage people and educate them and get the word out in a different way, because it hadn't even been reported on in our main only newspaper in the county, which serves, I don't know, a couple 100,000 people. So that felt like a big win, that all of a sudden it was news, whereas it had been going for years and nobody had written a single article about it in Eugene, you know, and in the larger county. So that felt like a win to me, that we got the word out about this pipeline. Yeah. And the kids were happy. That was a good win too.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned the lawsuit with the Youth v. Gov, and we had a question on what the status of that is. Have you been following that closely? I know that they're coming out with a documentary, and there's been a long struggle in the courts, but do you have anything to share on that?
I'm not probably the best person right now, because there's two different ones that I'm following. There's the federal and then there's the Oregon one. And yeah, I think the Oregon one came out yesterday split, which I think means it doesn't go forward. So I'm probably not super up to date. It's not great. I think that what I sort of vaguely know is that in the US, it's not quite moving in the way that the young people were hoping, but in other countries, so our Children's Trust is a global organization. It's based here in Eugene, but they're having, last I heard, a little more success in other countries, maybe because of the way their legal systems are structured, but there's a little more advancement in other countries. So that's probably the best I should say, the most I should say about that. And I think the best thing is to watch the documentary. It's going to be released, I think, November 12th. They're selling tickets, and that's going to be wonderful. I know the filmmaker, I've watched her working because she's been here a lot in Eugene. And I think it's going to be a wonderful documentary. And check out our Children's Trust, because they have all of this, you know, the status reports on all of the different cases worldwide. But check out where they are on the federal case. It's an important case. It's been galvanizing for young people. And I'm guessing that they're just pivoting, and, you know, they're always seeing the next thing that they can work on. So I don't, even if it's not necessarily plowing forward in the US on that particular federal case, there are always a lot of campaigns going.
Great, thank you. Yeah, for folks listening in, ourchildrenstrust.org is the website where you can go for up-to-date information on that. So Mary, I know you touched on this a little bit, but can you share some more about what do you think the biggest barriers are preventing parents from becoming more actively involved in climate solutions?
Well, I guess I would say it's hard to answer that without the context of right now, the pandemic. So I think the biggest barrier is that this society doesn't support parents at all, hardly at all in this country. And I'm sure a lot of you have friends who live in other countries, and it's just night and day with some countries that have, you know, maternity care, or they have maternity paid leave. And even simple things, not even that simple, but even just the fact that college is affordable in other countries, that's a huge burden on families. And sometimes when I was writing the book and trying to help my son, you know, apply to college, it was all happening the same year. Sometimes I would just look at my husband and say, you know, if college were free or affordable, parenting would be so much easier, because for at least 4 years, you're kind of focused on how are we going to afford this, and what hoops can they jump through, and what scholarships can they win. And people are planning that from kindergarten, you know, for how they're going to parent and how their kids are going to excel. And so I think that's one of the biggest things. It's not related to climate in a way, but it is, because parents are so distracted just trying to survive and to launch our children in the world safely, that I think it's a huge barrier is just the education piece and the yoke of debt around parents to educate their children. So that's, yeah, I didn't expect that to come out of my mouth, but that's what came out of my mouth was the need for education. I also think in terms of what, maybe what 350 Sacramento can do to support parents' engagement would be to ask parents what they need, just ask, why aren't you coming and would you come if, what would it take to engage parents? And I think a lot of the time that's just making it super easy, like having, when you're a parent and you're trying to support your school, you click onto something like volunteer spot and boom, okay, I'm serving pizza at the fundraiser from 7 to 8 on Thursday night. And that's it. The instructions are there. That's it. No long meetings, it's just often a lot easier to volunteer outside of the grassroots than it is in the grassroots, honestly, is what I found. So engaging parents, I think you just need to make it as easy for them to engage in climate justice advocacy as it is for them to sign up to serve pizza at the school fundraiser.
Great, thank you. We have another comment and a question from our audience. Thank you for the wonderful book. And you recommended some other books throughout your presentation. Are there some that you want to particularly call out as being your favorites or recent ones that you're excited about?
I think Jamie Margolin's Youth to Power, Your Voice and How to Use It by Hachette Publishers is fabulous. And you can look at my, if you want more details on it, I really go into it as an activist and a parent in my Sierra Magazine review. So just look under me or on my website, it's somewhere, just my name and Jamie Margolin and Sierra Magazine, you'll get a great long review or medium size review. That would be one. I love Greta Thunberg's, anything she writes or says. I think her book, No One is Too Small to Make a Difference, it's very clarifying for me as a writer. I just read her stuff and it's like, oh, I can't wait to hear where she's going to be in 10 years if she's already so amazingly, clarifying and simple, but not simple, not simplistic in her analysis and in her writing. It's just clear and beautiful. So I loved her book. Braiding Sweetgrass, I think was a nice book for me to read as a non-Indigenous person, understanding what perspectives are really going to enrich our approach to the climate crisis. So that's by Robin Wall Kimmerer. Those are, I think, 3 that are popping up the most. But the Youth to Power is really good for giving people concrete ideas for how to be an activist, starting from zero. And I love how comprehensive it is.
Those are great recommendations. Thank you for sharing those with our audience today. We have another question here. What has been the greatest reward for you from doing this work?
I can look my kids in the eye. I mean, I thought that when they got older, I wouldn't feel as fierce about climate justice work. And it's actually not changed at all. In fact, my son, we talk a lot about his feelings about the world now in the pandemic. He's actually living back at home from college. And so I hear him processing all this crazy stuff with Trump and the election and the Supreme Court shenanigans. And it's hard to watch him sort of being betrayed by the older generation and being disillusioned. And I think what's really rewarding for me is that because I've done this work for so long now, I actually have some pretty reasonable things to say to him because I study it all day long. And he's been making calls. He's been joining calls for hours a week. So I guess that kind of feels like a weird brag, I guess, the way I just said that. But I don't know, I guess I can say that I've been following my own advice, and I'm glad that my son has chosen to take his despair and rage and move it into trying to convince other people to vote or to switch their perspective. And I think that's all we can do, is just kind of hold tight to each other, link arms, and love each other up, and do our best with whatever we have at a given time, and just keep encouraging each other to take breaks when we need it and to grieve when we need it, which we need, especially right now. That Supreme Court issue is going to be a real pain in the ass for the climate movement. Having Barrett on the court, it's going to make our job harder. Hopefully we get a Democratic everything, and we can figure out how to move forward on the climate. But I think that's a long answer. What makes me feel better is that my kids are proud of the work I'm doing, and they're talking to me about their feelings about what they're seeing, and we're working on ideas together, and they educate me and I give them ideas that I collect, and that just feels good to me as a climate activist and as a parent. Yeah, it's a great question.
Thank you for that inspiring answer. So it's 6:55. I want to be mindful of time, but I'd love to just kick it to you, Mary, if you want to leave any lasting thoughts, advice, any words for our audience before we announce our prizes and close out for the evening.
Let's see, last thoughts I think would be to, I think it's really important to be mindful of our thoughts and the words that come out of our mouths right now, especially with young people, that they are looking to us for their optimism and for their hope, and not to underestimate the power of the adults in the room and what our emotions are towards the current administration, toward the electoral process, toward the climate crisis, toward our prospects on the planet. I think we really need to do everything that we can to feel community connection around our grief, feel community connection around our activism. And that's why what you're doing is so important, because it gives people a meeting place. It gives people things that they can do. It gives people education, and it gives people a chance to step back when they need to and know that they can take a rest and take care of their spirits, because other people are still moving forward on 350 Sacramento. So I think I would just say, stay together, do what you can, trust in community, and trust in science. They're saying we still have a shot at all of this, and we don't know what the outcome is, but we certainly are going to have a much better outcome if we throw everything that we can at it right now together. So I think that's my best rousing ending, is to say, when we imagine the future we want and then start working toward it, it's much more fun, it's much more connected, and we have a much better chance of creating the future that we want.
Virtual round of applause. Mary, thank you so much for your time today and for speaking with us. You can visit her website, marydemocker.com. I encourage you to check out her book. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. And, so much of your work, Mary, really resonated with me for many reasons. You talk about how we need to, take the guilt out of this equation. We can't just focus on the individual things that we're doing or that we're not doing, and we really need to focus on how can we come together as a community and change the systems to create this future that we want to see. I also have a background in the arts as well, and so that really resonated with me, bringing in the different artistic components into your activism. That's me up on the screen there. You can check out my book and music on my website there. Moise, who has been behind the scenes, helping out with all of the technical aspects. That's him up there. He's a board member of 350 Sacramento and a new staff member as well. 350 Sacramento, I'm going to make a pitch for our organization, because we are funded from everyday folks like you who donate to keep this work going, to help support climate solutions. So please visit 350sacramento.org to make a donation and get more involved. There's a lot more events happening throughout the month of October to celebrate our 10-year anniversary, and a lot more to do in the next 10 years to get us where we want to go. So Mary, again, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And I'm going to pass it on to Goli and Moise, who are going to share a little bit more before we announce our prizes.
Moise, you're going to do the prizes, right? I'm sorry, you're
Yes,
going to
yeah.
take action. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, yeah, just as as Angela just mentioned, you can check out 350sacramento.org, marydemoccer.com, and get involved in our work. Definitely vote as we're approaching this election. And let's announce our prize winners. So our first three winners for the t-shirts, we have Lynn Goldsmith, Elle Green, and Rod Malloy. Congratulations, you'll be getting a 350 Sacramento Climate Hero t-shirt. For books signed by Mary, we have Kat, Zia, and Alan Saunders. Congratulations, you'll be getting an autographed book. And our grand prize winner will be Bill Williams. Congratulations, you'll be getting sunset sail and dessert on Folsom Lake, which is for a maximum of 2 adults or 1 adult and 2 kids next year. And just to wrap up, so this is, as Angela mentioned, we have a full month of anniversary events. Most of them have passed, but we still do have our panel, Future of Food. We're still wrapping up our walk and roll-a-thon today, and we'll be finishing the month off with our Green the Ween Halloween costume contest. And just to wrap it all up, we'll be just playing one of Angela's songs.
Thanks everybody for joining us. And Mary, thanks again. Really appreciate your wonderful work and an inspiring talk.
Farmer Flores had a farm, organic was its name. Oh, E-A-R-T-H, 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 saving Earth's the main goal. Farmer Flores had a wish to rid the earth of coal. C-L-E-A-N, 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 clean energy's the way to go. Farmer Flores learned to farm for people in his town. Oh, L-O-C-A-L, 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 buy local fruits and vegetables. Buy local fruits and vegetables.
Nice job, guys.
Yes,
All right, that's everything.
that
See
was
ya.